Hi, welcome back to Beat Goblin. Today we're turning this into this. And this into this. In order to ultimately create this. This is a follow-up to a couple of videos, one on this channel and one on my main channel. I did a recent video about how to make boring sounds more interesting, and this is kind of a follow-up to that with some additional stuff and a few specific versions of it. And if you want to see me walk you through the making of this beat on my MPC-1, check out the video that I'll link at the end of this video. Regardless, let's just jump into it, starting off with these drums, because, admittedly, they're pretty boring by themselves. Just 3 simple little samples from my $5 sample pack, link in the description. I guess I'm not really selling it well by calling them boring, but who cares? I've got a lot of processing going on, especially because I've been playing around a lot with this plugin Texture by Devious Machines. Now, I want to be very clear here. You can do this with a lot of other stuff. You don't need this plugin to get this effect. If you have a piece of software that has an envelope follower in it, you can do this. Or if you've got the patience to do some custom automation, once again, you can easily do this. I just got this plugin because I wanted to play around with it and because it seemed like an easy way to implement this effect. Essentially what it does is it follows the transients of the piece of sound you have, in this case the drums. See those spikes with the kick and snare? You've got your threshold set so it's not picking up those hi-hats really. And it will play a continuous stream of sound and then open up this gate when the transients of your drum pattern, say, hit. This means that you can imbue any, especially drum part, but pretty much any part with texture. That is very tied to the part itself. So let me take this crackle one and crank it to like a silly degree so you can hear this a lot more clearly. So there's a vinyl crackle that is being shaped according to the kick and snare. Let me bring that down to whatever it was. And you can see how it's going to be pretty easy to go overboard with this, which is why I intentionally didn't. I could take this like way too far and it just sounded way too busy and like there was way too much just stuff going on. So I tried to be restrained with it and it just brings the stuff to life a little bit. So this is with the vinyl crackle. This is cave ambience, and I also have the pitch modulated a bit. These little water droplets. Once again, we want to keep that kind of subtle. A shaker. Once again, just layered in there until it's barely audible. And paper crumpling. And that's got quite a bit of pitch modulation on it. Because you've got these dedicated LFO sections, EQ for the texture itself, and I really like the controls on this. It's definitely a bit of a gimmick and you wouldn't want to use it on everything, but I've been having a lot of fun with this plugin. And you can also bring in your own sounds, of course, in addition to all the ones that it has built in. And you can see I've even done some shaping of the gate itself. So let's lay that in there subtly. And then next, let's bring in another favorite crystallizer. And the thing that it has built in here that I haven't used a ton in the past is a ducker. So this plugin is basically a granular delay, and you have a bunch of control over how the grains behave, including their pitch and making them reversed. So let me get rid of texture so you can hear this by itself, and let me get rid of the ducker. You can hear all of this crackling coming from the fact that it is feeding back into itself pitched up versions of the drums that are all reversed, and it creates kind of a texture of its own as it feeds back into itself. And then I have gone in, layered it very subtly, and then ducked it to the transients. So it only pops up in the gaps between kick and snares. So it fills them in nicely and once again adds even more texture. So let's bring in our texture plugins. This kind of crackling that we've basically created out of thin air. On top of that, we've got knock, saturation, and a tiny bit of soft clipping. You can do this with other plugins, probably including stock plugins, depending on your DAW. I just like the way this is laid out. This plugin is doing a lot of work. This is like a messed up tape simulator. And it's also definitely making it a bit louder. But it's adding this nice chunk with this distortion that I really like. And I should also mention, for something like a drum part, you probably want to turn desync off because it does create some time warbling, which can be fine. In this case, it just was not working for me. A limiter just to catch any peaks. I don't think I ended up really needing it. And then, because you have this audio tail, I've added a volume plugin to just aggressively cut it off. I've also layered in, because this is rendered out from my MPC-1, which is a piece of hardware, I just hand selected a clap and then reverbed that out, and then once again added that tape plugin and Crystalline by Baby Audio with the dry wet turned all the way to wet, layer it together. You'll never know that that wasn't part of the original drum part. Up next, let's look at turning an electric piano into a pad sound, aka turning pretty much any sound into a pad sound. So first of all, let's just play the electric piano sound by itself. Spaced Out by Baby Audio. Gives it this nice smooth floatiness. So that's that layer. Let's turn it into a pad. A big shimmery pad. Starting by pitching it up an octave, which sounds bad. But that's fine, because we're going to bury it under layers of effects. Bit of EQ to tame it. Super VHS to widen it out and add a bit of saturation. You can also do this just with the free Magic plugin from Baby Audio. That just gives you this stereo widening effect. Spaced out. Reverbing and delaying it out quite a bit. I've got this big old wide delay and it's reversed. It's got a bit of wonkiness to it and this big spacey reverb. So that's pretty pad-like, right? We're not done. Crystallizer comes back. You can hear it feeding stuff back into itself, doing that little kind of arpeggio thing. And then that's fairly in your face, and so let's bring in another Baby Audio plugin, Crystalline, to reverb it out a bit. The width turned all the way up, sparkle turned up, modulation turned up a little bit. Adjust to taste. And then layer it. And you can hear the sidechain pumping pretty harshly on that electric piano. So here's without. I've basically created a layer out of thin air, which I think is pretty cool. I should also mention a bit of an unintended effect that I added. This is a strings patch that sounds kind of mid, at least by itself. So I was like, oh, I wonder if I could make it sound a little more oldie-timey. So I brought in Isotope's vinyl plugin. And here's a little secret that's hiding in plain sight that people don't always notice in Reaper. You've got a mix knob that is independent from the plugin. So if I turn this all the way up, this is what it sounds like vinyled, which is cool, but just still wasn't quite fitting for me. So I was like, well, what if I crank the mix down? And because it's warbling around in pitch, because of the effect, it's creating phasiness with the original signal, and I've basically accidentally invented a phaser. And I think it sounds really neat, so I left it like that, on purpose. And then brought it in slowly with a high-cut filter over time. And then for the final section, once it's sidechained, I left it unaffected, so it kind of gets to be strings finally, because it's a little more in the background. But for this little breakdown, I kind of turned strings into a synth. Normally people try to turn synths into strings like 80s style. This is the reverse of that, and I think it sounded kind of dope. Finally, one other trick that I didn't end up using in this track, but I still want to show it to you because I think it's fun and kind of underutilized. This creates really spooky reverb reverse tails. So here's what you do. you take your drum track or your melody or whatnot, drench it in effects and reverb. Oh God, what have I done? And you reverse it. So you reverse the actual audio signal with all the effects on it. And it sounds like garbage. Stop! No! Horrible. Awful. I might have gone overboard with the effects a little bit. You render that out, and then reverse it again. So that means that the dry signal, hiding under everything, is now forwards once again, but all the reverb and delay tails are now reversed. Then you line it up with your actual dry signal. I could actually probably stand to shift this forward a little bit. It'll take some playing around with. Once again, it didn't really work for this track specifically, but I still wanted to show it to you because I think it's fun. Anyway, if you'd like to see even more effects, plugins, shenanigans, you can click or tap up over here. And if you'd like to see how I made this beat on the MPC-1, you can click or tap up over here. And be sure to stream the song. The link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.